Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Tonight we're going to learn about déjà vu. So, as you make yourselves comfortable, please take a moment to let us know where you're listening from, and feel free to subscribe. Now, as always, take a moment for some deep breaths, letting your mind and body relax for a good night of sleep. Before we begin today's lecture, I have to ask, has anyone ever had the strange feeling that they've attended this exact lecture before? That they've seen me make this exact joke, heard these exact words, in this exact room? Well, if you have, congratulations, you've just experienced what we're here to discuss today. Déjà vu. And if you're thinking, wait, didn't we already cover this topic last week? No, we didn't. That's just your brain being wonderfully weird, which, as it turns out, is exactly what déjà vu is all about. Déjà vu, French for already seen, is one of the most fascinating and universal human experiences. Studies show that between 60 to 80% of people have experienced this peculiar phenomenon at least once in their lives. It's that eerie feeling that the present moment has happened before, down to the smallest detail, even though you know rationally that it hasn't. Now, before anyone asks, no, déjà vu is not evidence that you're psychic, that you've lived past lives, or that we're all living in a simulation. Though I have to admit, that last one is still up for debate among philosophers and physicists. But from a neuroscience perspective, déjà vu is something far more interesting. It's a window into how our brains construct our sense of time, memory, and reality itself. Today, we're going to explore the science behind this phenomenon. We'll discuss what happens in your brain during a déjà vu experience, examine the various theories that attempt to explain it, look at the research methods scientists use to study something so ephemeral, and consider what déjà vu might tell us about consciousness itself. The experience of déjà vu has been recognized for centuries, long before we had the scientific tools to understand it. Ancient peoples often attributed these experiences to supernatural causes, glimpses of past lives, prophetic visions, or messages from the divine. The term déjà vu was coined by French psychic researcher Émile Boirac in 1876. Yes, you heard that right, a psychic researcher named it. Don't worry, we've come a long way since then in our scientific understanding, though I suppose Boirac deserves credit for giving us a memorable name for the phenomenon. In the early 20th century, pioneering neurologists like Hewlings-Jackson began to notice that patients with temporal lobe epilepsy often reported intense feelings of familiarity and dreamy states before seizures. This was our first real clue that déjà vu might be rooted in the temporal lobe, the brain region crucial for memory processing. Sigmund Freud, never one to miss an opportunity to complicate things, suggested that déjà vu resulted from repressed memories suddenly surfacing. While Freud's explanation doesn't hold up to modern scrutiny, he was onto something important. Déjà vu does seem to involve our memory systems, just not in the way he imagined. Before we dive into the neural mechanisms, let's establish exactly what we're talking about. Déjà vu isn't just thinking, I've been here before, when you visit a place that reminds you of somewhere else. True déjà vu has several distinct characteristics. Intense familiarity. The feeling isn't mild recognition, it's profound, almost overwhelming certainty that you've experienced this exact moment before. Specificity. It's not just that the place or person seems familiar, it's that this specific combination of sensory inputs, thoughts, and context feels identical to a previous experience. Temporal displacement. You feel as though you're remembering the future. You might think you know what someone is about to say or do next. Metacognitive awareness. Here's the kicker throughout the experience. You maintain awareness that this feeling doesn't make logical sense. You know you haven't been here before, but you feel like you have. It's this cognitive tension that makes déjà vu so unsettling. Brief duration. Most déjà vu experiences last only 10 to 30 seconds. They're intense but fleeting, which, as we'll see, has made them incredibly difficult to study. Emotional component. Déjà vu often comes with a distinct emotional tone, sometimes eerie or unsettling, sometimes pleasant, but rarely neutral. Now, let's distinguish déjà vu from some related phenomena that people often confuse with it. Déjà, entendu, already heard, the feeling that you've heard specific sounds or conversations before. Déjà vécu, already lived, a more intense version where you feel you've not just seen, but actively lived through the exact same sequence of events. Jamais vu, never seen. The opposite phenomenon, finding familiar places or faces suddenly strange and unfamiliar. This is like walking into your own kitchen and feeling like you've never seen it before. Presque vu, almost seen. That tip of the tongue feeling when you almost remember something but can't quite grasp it. The neuroscience. What's happening in your brain? Now, for the fun part, let's pop the hood and see what's actually happening in your brain during a déjà vu experience. Fair warning, we're about to get into some complex neuroscience, but I promise to keep the jargon to a minimum. Think of this as neuroscience for humans, rather than neuroscience for neurons. To understand déjà vu, we first need to understand how memory normally works. Your brain doesn't store memories like a video recorder. Instead, it has multiple, interconnected memory systems. The hippocampus. This seahorse-shaped structure is crucial for forming new memories and connecting them to context when and where something happened. Think of it as your brain's librarian, cataloging new information and helping you retrieve it later. The rhinal cortex. This includes the perihynal and entorhinal cortices, which are involved in recognition memory, that feeling of familiarity when you encounter something you've seen before. The temporal lobes. These large brain regions house both the hippocampus and rhinal cortex, along with other structures involved in memory and perception. The frontal lobes. These are involved in working memory, decision-making, and what neuroscientists call metacognition, thinking about thinking. Some leading theories. Scientists have proposed several theories about what goes wrong or right, depending on your perspective during déjà vu. 1. The dual processing theory. This is currently the most widely accepted explanation. The idea is that your brain normally processes information through two parallel pathways, one fast and unconscious, one slower and conscious. Usually, these pathways are perfectly synchronized, but sometimes, perhaps due to fatigue, stress, or just random neural firing, there's a slight delay between these pathways. The unconscious pathway processes the current situation first, creating a sense of familiarity. Then, a fraction of a second later, the conscious pathway kicks in, making you aware of your surroundings. Your brain then tries to make sense of this. Why do I feel familiar with this situation that I'm just now becoming consciously aware of? The only logical explanation your brain can come up with is that you must have experienced this before. Voila, déjà vu. It's like your brain is a little slow on the uptake and then tries to cover for its timing mistake by inventing a memory. We've all been there, brain. We've all been there. 2. The hologram theory. This theory suggests that memories are stored like holograms distributed across many neural networks rather than in specific locations. Normally, when you encounter something familiar, multiple memory fragments are activated simultaneously, giving you a complete picture. But sometimes, a current situation might activate just a fragment of an old memory. Perhaps the lighting is similar to a restaurant you visited years ago, or someone's laugh reminds you of an old friend. This partial activation creates a sense of familiarity without providing the context needed to identify the actual source. Your brain senses the familiarity but can't pinpoint its origin, so it assumes the familiarity must be related to the current situation. It's like recognizing a melody but not being able to remember the song, except your brain decides the melody must be coming from the radio in front of you, even though it's actually coming from your memory. 3. The attention theory. This theory proposes that déjà vu occurs when you briefly perceive something without paying full attention to it, then immediately afterward give it your full attention. Imagine you're walking into a coffee shop while distracted by your phone. Your peripheral vision and unconscious processing systems take in the scene, the layout, the smells, the sounds. Then, you look up and consciously perceive the same environment, Your brain recognizes the similarity between what it unconsciously processed moments before and what you're now consciously seeing, interpreting this as a memory of having been there before. It's essentially your brain's way of saying, "I've seen this before," when what it really means is, "I saw this 3 seconds ago, but I wasn't paying attention." 4. The neural pathway mismatch theory. This theory focuses on the physical pathways that visual information takes through your brain. Normally, visual information from both eyes is processed simultaneously and compared for consistency. But sometimes, there might be a slight delay in processing between the two pathways. One pathway processes the visual scene and sends the information to your familiarity detection system. Meanwhile, the other pathway, running slightly behind, processes the same information and sends it to your conscious awareness. When the second signal arrives, your brain has already tagged the scene as familiar, leading to the déjà vu experience. Think of it as your brain's equivalent of seeing double, except instead of seeing 2 images, you're experiencing 2 temporal versions of the same moment. Much of our understanding of déjà vu comes from studying patients with temporal lobe epilepsy. These patients often report intense déjà vu experiences as part of their seizure auras, the warning signs that precede a full seizure. During these episodes, we can actually see what's happening in the brain, using EEG, electroencephalography, and other neuroimaging techniques. The patterns we observe show abnormal electrical activity in the temporal lobe, particularly in the hippocampus and surrounding areas. This has led researchers to identify the temporal lobe as the likely epicenter of déjà vu experiences. When these regions are stimulated electrically during brain surgery, don't worry, patients are awake and feel no pain during these procedures, they often report déjà vu-like experiences. Famous neurologist Wilder Penfield discovered this in the 1950s when he was mapping the brain functions of epilepsy patients. When he stimulated certain areas of the temporal lobe, patients would suddenly exclaim things like, "I've been through this before," or "This is familiar." These observations provided some of the first direct evidence linking déjà vu to specific brain regions. Studying déjà vu scientifically is like trying to catch lightning in a bottle if lightning only lasted 30 seconds, happened unpredictably, and couldn't be reliably reproduced in a laboratory. As you might imagine, this presents some significant challenges for researchers. Survey studies. Much of early déjà vu research relied on questionnaires and interviews. Researchers would ask people about their déjà vu experiences. How often do they occur? What triggers them? How do they feel during the experience? While these studies provided valuable demographic information such as the fact that déjà vu peaks in adolescence and early adulthood, they suffered from the obvious limitation of relying on people's memories of an experience that's fundamentally about faulty memory. It's a bit like asking someone to accurately remember a dream about forgetting something. Clinical studies. Researchers studied patients with temporal lobe epilepsy who experienced déjà vu more frequently than the general population. These studies provided insights into the brain regions involved, but epileptic déjà vu might not be identical to the everyday variety. Neuroimaging during seizures. When epilepsy patients experience déjà vu as part of their seizure auras, researchers can sometimes capture brain activity using EEG or fMRI. However, these episodes are unpredictable and often brief, making systematic study difficult. Recently, researchers have developed clever ways to induce déjà vu-like experiences in laboratory settings. The DRM paradigm. Dies Roediger, McDermott. Researchers use this memory illusion paradigm to create controlled false familiarity. Participants study lists of related words like bed, rest, awake, tired, dream, but not the word that ties them together, sleep. Later, when shown the unstudied word sleep, participants often feel strongly that they've seen it before, even though they haven't. While not identical to déjà vu, this creates a similar feeling of inappropriate familiarity that researchers can study systematically. Virtual reality studies. Some researchers use virtual reality environments to create situations where participants might experience déjà vu. They might have participants navigate through a virtual building, then later present them with a similar but not identical virtual environment. The goal is to create enough similarity to trigger familiarity without perfect matching. Hypnotic induction. A few studies have used hypnosis to suggest to participants that they will experience a feeling of familiarity in response to a specific cue during a later task. While ethically complex and not widely used, these studies have provided some insights into the subjective experience of inappropriate familiarity. The immersive virtual reality approach. Recent studies have created elaborate virtual environments designed to maximize the chances of déjà vu. Participants explore virtual worlds while their brain activity is monitored, and researchers look for neural signatures that might predict or accompany déjà vu experiences. The Akira O'Connor studies. Dr. Akira O'Connor at the University of St. Andrews has conducted some of the most innovative déjà vu research in recent years. His team developed a method to reliably induce déjà vu-like experiences in about half of participants. They use a technique based on the tip of the tongue phenomenon. Participants hear a list of words and are asked to think of a word that starts with the first letters of each word they hear. For example, they might hear bed, altar, radio, night, and be asked to think of a word starting with B-A-R-N. Later, participants are taken to rooms whose layouts correspond to the first letters of words from the earlier task, but they're not told about this connection. About 50% of participants report déjà vu when entering these rooms, and fMRI scans during these experiences show increased activity in the frontal cortex, the brain region, involved in conflict, monitoring, and decision-making. This suggests that déjà vu might involve the brain's conflict detection systems, recognizing that something doesn't add up. I feel like I've been here before, but I know I haven't. Not everyone experiences déjà vu equally. Research has identified several factors that influence how often someone might experience this phenomenon. Déjà vu frequency follows an interesting pattern across the lifespan. It's relatively rare in young children, under age 8, peaks during adolescence and young adulthood, ages 15 to 25, and then gradually decreases with age. There are several theories about why this happens. Brain development. The teenage brain is still developing, particularly the frontal lobes responsible for higher-order thinking and the temporal lobes involved in memory. This developmental process might create conditions that favor déjà vu experiences. Memory load. Young adults are constantly encountering new experiences and forming new memories at a rapid rate. This high level of memory formation and consolidation might increase the chances of the timing glitches that seem to underlie déjà vu. Stress and fatigue. Young adults often experience high levels of stress and irregular sleep patterns, both of which are associated with increased déjà vu frequency. Cognitive flexibility. Younger brains might be more likely to notice and report the subtle cognitive conflicts that characterize déjà vu, while older adults might dismiss or not attend to these fleeting experiences. Research has identified several personality traits associated with déjà vu frequency. Openness to experience. People who score high on measures of openness, those who are curious, imaginative, and willing to consider new ideas tend to report more déjà vu experiences. This might reflect a greater willingness to notice and report unusual mental phenomena. Absorption. This trait refers to the tendency to become deeply involved in experiences, like getting completely lost in a book or movie. People high in absorption report more déjà vu, possibly because they're more attuned to subtle changes in their subjective experience. Fantasy proneness. Individuals who frequently engage in daydreaming and fantasy also report more déjà vu. This might reflect similar underlying neural mechanisms, or simply a greater attention to internal mental experiences. Anxiety. Interestingly, people with higher trait anxiety tend to experience more déjà vu. This could be because anxiety involves heightened attention to potential threats or inconsistencies in the environment, the same kind of monitoring that might detect the cognitive conflict inherent in déjà vu. People who travel frequently or regularly encounter novel environments report more déjà vu experiences. This makes sense from several theoretical perspectives. Increased memory demands. Novel environments require more active memory processing, potentially increasing the likelihood of the timing errors that might underlie déjà vu. Pattern matching. Travel exposes you to many new places that might partially match stored memories, increasing opportunities for the kind of partial memory activation proposed by hologram theories. Fatigue. Travel often involves fatigue, stress, and disrupted sleep patterns, all factors associated with increased déjà vu frequency. Both acute stress and chronic fatigue are strongly associated with increased déjà vu frequency. Students often report more déjà vu experiences during finals week, and people going through major life changes frequently experience more episodes. The connection between stress divided by fatigue and déjà vu makes sense from a neural timing perspective. When we're tired or stressed, our brains don't function at peak efficiency. The precise timing required for normal memory processing might be disrupted, creating conditions favorable to déjà vu. While déjà vu appears to be a universal human experience, there are interesting cultural and linguistic variations in how it's understood and reported. Different cultures have varying explanations for déjà vu experiences. Western cultures tend to view déjà vu as a curiosity or minor brain glitch, often with a slightly mystical or supernatural undertone, but generally not cause for concern. Some Asian cultures may interpret déjà vu as evidence of reincarnation or karmic connections, seeing it as a glimpse of past lives or spiritual significance. Indigenous cultures. Some view déjà vu as communication from ancestors or spirits, or as evidence of the interconnected nature of time and experience. Scientific cultures increasingly view déjà vu through a neurobiological lens, as evidence of interesting brain mechanisms rather than supernatural phenomena. These cultural differences can influence both the frequency with which déjà vu is reported and how distressing or meaningful people find the experience. The French term déjà vu has become nearly universal, but many languages have their own terms for the experience. German, schon mal erlebt, already experienced. Dutch, all'ins beleefd, already once experienced. Italian, già visto, already seen. Japanese, kyoku no sakimawari, memory going ahead. Interestingly, languages that have more specific terminology for memory phenomena sometimes show higher reported rates of déjà vu, suggesting that having words for an experience might make people more likely to notice and report it. The pathological side. When déjà vu becomes a problem, while déjà vu is generally harmless and even interesting for most people, it can sometimes indicate or accompany more serious neurological conditions. As mentioned earlier, people with temporal lobe epilepsy often experience intense, frequent déjà vu as part of their seizure auras. These episodes can be more intense and longer lasting than typical déjà vu, sometimes accompanied by other symptoms like unusual tastes or smells, rising sensations in the stomach, intense emotions, fear, euphoria, or sadness, auditory or visual hallucinations, feelings of depersonalization or unreality. For these patients, déjà vu can be a warning sign of an impending seizure, allowing them to take precautions or seek help. In very rare cases, some individuals experience almost constant déjà vu, a condition sometimes called chronic déjà vu syndrome. These patients feel that every experience, every conversation, every moment has happened before. This can be extremely distressing and disabling. Chronic déjà vu has been associated with certain psychiatric medications, brain injuries, particularly to the temporal lobes, neurodegenerative diseases, severe anxiety or panic disorders. Interestingly, people with dementia sometimes experience increased déjà vu in the early stages of the disease, possibly as their memory systems begin to malfunction. However, as the disease progresses and memory systems are more severely damaged, déjà vu typically becomes less frequent. When déjà vu becomes pathological, too frequent, too intense, or too distressing treatment, typically focuses on addressing the underlying cause. For epilepsy-related déjà vu, anti-seizure medications. For anxiety-related déjà vu, anxiety treatment, therapy, sometimes anti-anxiety medications. For medication-induced déjà vu, medication adjustments. For brain injury-related déjà vu, rehabilitation and symptom management. Beyond its intrinsic interest as a quirky brain phenomenon, déjà vu offers profound insights into the nature of human consciousness and subjective experience. Déjà vu demonstrates that our sense of reality is actively constructed by our brains rather than simply perceived. The fact that we can feel certain about something we know to be false reveals the interpretive nature of consciousness. Our brains are constantly making judgments and inferences based on incomplete information, filling in gaps and making sense of sensory input. Déjà vu shows us this process in action. Our brain encounters a conflict between different types of information, familiarity versus knowledge, and resolves it by creating a narrative. I must have experienced this before. Déjà vu reveals memory to be much more complex and reconstructive than our intuitive understanding suggests. We tend to think of memory as simply retrieving stored information, but déjà vu shows us that memory involves multiple systems that can sometimes provide conflicting signals. The experience also demonstrates that familiarity and recollection, feeling like you know something versus actually remembering it, are distinct processes that can become dissociated. Perhaps most intriguingly, déjà vu offers insights into how we experience time. Our sense of temporal flow, the feeling that moments flow from past through present to future, is also a construction of consciousness. Déjà vu disrupts this constructed timeline, creating a moment where past and present seem to collapse into each other. This gives us a unique window into how our brains normally maintain our sense of temporal continuity. The fact that we can experience déjà vu while simultaneously knowing it doesn't make sense demonstrates our capacity for metacognition, thinking about our own thinking. This self-reflective awareness is one of the most remarkable aspects of human consciousness. Déjà vu shows us this metacognitive system in action. We can simultaneously experience a strong feeling, familiarity, and recognize that this feeling is inappropriate given the circumstances. This kind of cognitive flexibility and self-monitoring is uniquely human. The field of déjà vu research is more active now than ever before, with several exciting areas of current investigation. New neuroimaging techniques are providing unprecedented insights into brain activity during déjà vu experiences. High-resolution fMRI, EEG with better temporal resolution, and new analysis techniques are helping researchers map the neural networks involved in déjà vu with greater precision. Recent studies have identified specific patterns of brain connectivity that seem to predict déjà vu experiences, suggesting that the phenomenon might involve complex interactions between multiple brain networks rather than activity in a single region. Researchers are developing computer models that attempt to simulate the neural mechanisms underlying déjà vu. These models help test theories about what goes wrong during déjà vu experiences and can generate predictions for future experiments. Some models focus on timing delays between neural pathways, others on memory retrieval processes, and still others on pattern completion mechanisms. As these models become more sophisticated, they're providing new insights into the cognitive mechanisms that might underlie the phenomenon. Advanced VR and AR technologies are opening new possibilities for déjà vu research. Researchers can now create highly controlled, immersive environments that maximize the chances of inducing déjà vu while monitoring participants' brain activity in real time. These technologies also allow researchers to manipulate environmental factors, systematically changing lighting, spatial layouts, or sensory inputs in precise ways to understand what triggers déjà vu experiences. While déjà vu is difficult to study in non-human animals since it requires self-reporting, some researchers are investigating whether similar phenomena might occur in other species. Studies of recognition memory and familiarity detection in animals might shed light on the evolutionary origins of the neural mechanisms underlying déjà vu. Emerging research is beginning to explore whether there might be genetic factors that influence déjà vu susceptibility. Twin studies and genetic association studies might help identify specific genes or neural developmental patterns that make some people more prone to déjà vu experiences. Understanding déjà vu better might have important clinical applications, particularly for epilepsy diagnosis and monitoring, early detection of memory disorders, understanding psychiatric conditions involving reality monitoring, developing better treatments for pathological déjà vu. While déjà vu research might seem purely academic, it actually has several practical implications. Déjà vu research contributes to our broader understanding of how normal memory and consciousness work. By studying what happens when these systems malfunction, we gain insights that inform everything from educational strategies to artificial intelligence development. For neurologists and psychiatrists, understanding déjà vu can be clinically valuable. Changes in déjà vu frequency or intensity can sometimes signal underlying neurological conditions before other symptoms become apparent. Research on the memory systems involved in déjà vu has contributed to our understanding of how to optimize learning and memory formation. Understanding how familiarity and recollection work separately can inform teaching strategies and study techniques. Insights from déjà vu research are informing the development of artificial intelligence systems, particularly those designed to recognize patterns or make decisions based on partial information. Understanding how biological memory systems can malfunction helps engineers design more robust artificial systems. For individuals who experience frequent or distressing déjà vu, understanding the phenomenon can be reassuring. Knowing that déjà vu has a neurobiological basis and is generally harmless can reduce anxiety about the experiences. As we look toward the future of déjà vu research, several exciting possibilities emerge. Future research will likely integrate multiple advanced technologies combining high-resolution neuroimaging with virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and real-time brain stimulation techniques. This multimodal approach could provide unprecedented insights into the neural mechanisms of déjà vu. As we understand more about individual differences in déjà vu susceptibility, we might develop personalized approaches to treating pathological déjà vu based on an individual's specific neural profile and risk factors. Déjà vu research will likely contribute to broader investigations into consciousness, free will, and subjective experience. Understanding how our brains construct our sense of reality moment by moment has implications far beyond déjà vu itself. Insights from déjà vu research might inform new approaches to education and training, particularly in areas where recognition and familiarity are important, such as medical diagnosis, pattern recognition, or skill learning. As we better understand the mechanisms underlying déjà vu, we'll likely gain new insights into philosophical questions about the nature of time, memory, and consciousness. These scientific findings will continue to inform philosophical debates about the nature of human experience. As we wrap up our journey through the science of déjà vu, I hope you've gained a new appreciation for this fascinating phenomenon. What initially seems like a simple quirk of consciousness turns out to be a window into some of the most fundamental aspects of how our brains work. Déjà vu reveals the constructed nature of our reality, the complexity of our memory systems, and the remarkable sophistication of our consciousness. It shows us that our brains are constantly making judgments, filling in gaps, and creating narratives to make sense of our experiences. Perhaps most importantly, déjà vu reminds us that there's still so much we don't understand about our own minds. Despite all our scientific advances, consciousness remains one of the greatest mysteries in science. Déjà vu is just one small piece of this larger puzzle, but it's a particularly intriguing piece that continues to challenge our understanding of what it means to be human. The next time you experience déjà vu, take a moment to appreciate what's happening. Your brain is giving you a glimpse behind the curtain of consciousness, showing you the normally invisible processes that construct your moment-to-moment experience of reality. It's a reminder that our minds are far more complex and fascinating than we typically recognize. And who knows, maybe you've heard all this before, but probably not. As we conclude, here are some questions to ponder. How might our understanding of déjà vu change as virtual and augmented reality technologies become more prevalent in our daily lives? What ethical considerations arise as we develop better methods for artificially inducing déjà vu experiences in research settings? How might déjà vu research inform our understanding of other altered states of consciousness, such as those experienced in meditation, psychedelic experiences, or lucid dreaming? If we could prevent déjà vu experiences entirely, should we? What might we lose by eliminating these small glitches in consciousness? How does understanding the neuroscience of déjà vu affect your personal interpretation of your own déjà vu experiences? Thank you for joining me tonight for this exploration of one of consciousness's most intriguing mysteries. I hope you found it as fascinating as I have, though if you've experienced déjà vu about this lecture, you might want to see a neurologist. And in case you've enjoyed our evening talk so much and still might be awake, here is another educational video for you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to The Droning Professor. Tonight we're going to learn about the physics of revolving doors, and we promise to do our best to not make you dizzy. So, as you make yourselves comfortable, please take a moment to let us know where you're listening from and feel free to subscribe. Now, as always, take a moment for some deep breaths, letting your mind and body relax for a good night of sleep. By chance, I hope you all managed to successfully navigate the revolving door at the entrance to certain buildings without getting trapped in an eternal loop or launching yourself into orbit. If you did get stuck, don't worry. By the end of tonight's lecture, you'll understand exactly why that happened, and more importantly, how to avoid becoming a human pinball in those spinning chambers of mild terror. Tonight we're going to explore what I like to call the physics of revolving doors, a topic that perfectly demonstrates how seemingly simple everyday objects are actually marvels of engineering that involve multiple branches of physics working in harmony. And yes, before you ask, this will be on the exam, so you might want to put down your phones and pay attention. I promise this will be more interesting than whatever's happening on social media, though admittedly that's a pretty low bar. Let's start with a question. How many of you have ever been in a revolving door? Raise your hands. Good, most of you. Now, how many of you have ever thought about the physics behind why that door works the way it does? I see 3 hands. This is exactly why we need this lecture. The revolving door, that cylindrical gateway that has been confusing tourists and delighting engineers since 1888, is actually a brilliant example of applied physics. It demonstrates principles of rotational mechanics, fluid dynamics, thermodynamics, material science, and even a touch of chaos theory when people don't know how to use them properly. The story begins with Theophilus Van Cannel, a Philadelphia inventor who was apparently so tired of holding doors open for people, or perhaps so socially awkward that he wanted to avoid the awkward dance of, "No, you go first," that he decided to create a door that would eliminate these problems entirely. On August 7, 1888, he received patent number 387,571 for what he called a storm door structure. Little did he know he was creating what would become a physics professor's dream teaching tool. But before we dive into the physics, let's establish what we're actually looking at. A revolving door consists of 3 or 4 door panels, called wings or leaves, mounted on a central shaft that rotates within a cylindrical enclosure. The entire mechanism is designed to maintain a seal between the interior and exterior environments while allowing continuous passage of people. It's like an airlock, but one that doesn't require you to wait for pressurization cycles. Now, let's talk about the fundamental physics principle that makes revolving doors work: rotational motion. When you push on a door panel, you're applying a torque, that's a rotational force, to the central shaft. Torque, as you'll remember from your mechanics course, is defined as the cross product of the position vector and the force vector, or more simply, tau equals r cross f, or torque equals R cross F, where R is the distance from the axis of rotation to the point where the force is applied, and F is the applied force. This is why revolving doors are designed with the push plates or handles positioned as far from the central axis as possible. The greater the distance R, the greater the torque for the same applied force. It's the same principle that makes it easier to open a regular door by pushing on the handle rather than pushing near the hinges. Physics is everywhere, people, even in your daily struggle with doors. The rotation of a revolving door follows the principles of angular momentum. Once you get the door moving, it tends to keep moving due to its rotational inertia. This is described by the equation L equals I omega, or angular momentum equals moment of inertia times omega, where L is angular momentum, I is the moment of inertia, and omega is the angular velocity. The moment of inertia depends on how the mass is distributed relative to the axis of rotation. For a revolving door, this includes not just the door panels themselves, but also any people inside the compartments. Yes, you become part of the door's moment of inertia when you're in there. This is where things get interesting, and where many people run into trouble, sometimes literally. The moment of inertia of a revolving door changes as people enter and exit. When a heavy person enters a compartment, the door's moment of inertia increases, and if the angular momentum is to be conserved, which it tends to be unless significant external torques are applied, the angular velocity must decrease. This is exactly like a figure skater extending their arms to slow down their spin. Conversely, when people exit the door, the moment of inertia decreases and the door speeds up. This is why you sometimes see revolving doors suddenly accelerate after people leave, occasionally catching unsuspecting individuals off guard. I've witnessed more than one professor, not naming names, but his office is 2 doors down from mine, get launched out of a revolving door like he was shot from a cannon because he didn't account for this change in rotational dynamics. The forces acting on a revolving door are more complex than they might initially appear. Obviously, there's the applied force from users, but there's also friction in the bearings that support the central shaft, air resistance from the movement of the large panels through the air, and what engineers call wind loading, the force exerted by wind pressure differences between the interior and exterior of the building. Friction in the bearings is particularly important because it provides the damping that prevents the door from spinning indefinitely once set in motion. The friction force is generally proportional to the normal force, pressing the bearing surfaces together, and the coefficient of friction between those surfaces. Without this friction, you'd push the door once and it would keep spinning until the heat death of the universe, creating the world's most ineffective centrifuge. Air resistance becomes significant at higher rotational speeds. As the door panels move through the air, they experience drag force that opposes their motion. The drag force on each panel can be approximated by the equation F equals 1/2 rho v squared CdA, or force equals 1/2 rho v squared times CD times A, where rho is the air density, v is the velocity of the panel, CD is the drag coefficient, and A is the frontal area of the panel. For a revolving door with 4 panels, each panel experiences drag, and these forces combine to create a net retarding torque about the central axis. Now, let's discuss one of the most important and often overlooked aspects of revolving door physics: pressure differentials and airflow. This is where fluid dynamics enters our story, and it's arguably the most crucial aspect of why revolving doors exist in the first place. Buildings, particularly tall ones, experience something called the stack effect. Warm air inside the building is less dense than cold air outside, so it rises and creates a pressure difference between the interior and exterior. In winter, this means there's often higher pressure at the top of the building and lower pressure at the bottom, creating a natural airflow from outside to inside at ground level and from inside to outside at upper levels. When you open a conventional door in winter, especially on a tall building, you're often fighting against this pressure difference. The door might slam shut behind you, or it might be difficult to open against the pressure. You've probably experienced this. That moment when you approach a door and it feels like it's being held shut by an invisible force, or when it swings closed so fast you have to jump out of the way. Revolving doors solve this problem elegantly. Because the door is always closed, there's no moment when there's an open connection between inside and outside. They maintain the pressure seal while still allowing passage. The small gaps between the door panels and the frame do allow some air exchange, but this is minimal compared to the massive air exchange that occurs every time a conventional door opens. This is where we get into some fascinating fluid dynamics. The airflow through a revolving door can be modeled using principles from both aerodynamics and thermodynamics. The small gaps around the door panels act like orifices, and the airflow through them follows the orifice equation. Q equals CdA times the square root of quantity 2 delta P over rho, or volumetric flow rate equals CdA times the square root of 2 delta P over rho, where Q is the volumetric flow rate, CD is the discharge coefficient, A is the effective area of the gaps, delta P is the pressure difference, and rho is the air density. The beauty of this system is that the airflow is largely independent of how fast people are moving through the door. Whether you saunter through leisurely or sprint through like you're late for an exam, which, judging by some of you, might be the case, the air exchange remains roughly constant. This is why revolving doors are so popular in buildings where maintaining interior climate control is important. But here's where human behavior intersects with physics in amusing ways. People often try to help the door by pushing harder when they feel resistance, not realizing that the resistance might be due to pressure differentials rather than mechanical friction. This can lead to what I call the revolving door feedback loop. The more resistance you feel, the harder you push, which makes the door move faster, which increases air resistance and bearing friction, which creates more resistance, leading you to push even harder. I once observed a gentleman in a downtown Chicago office building engaged in what appeared to be mortal combat with a revolving door during a particularly windy day. The pressure differentials were substantial due to the wind, and rather than recognizing this and adjusting his approach, he kept pushing harder and harder, eventually spinning the door so fast that he completed nearly 2 full rotations before managing to exit. By the time he emerged, he was dizzy, disoriented, and had acquired what can only be described as a very undignified hair situation. This brings us to the concept of resonance, which can occur in revolving doors under certain conditions. Every mechanical system has natural frequencies at which it tends to vibrate or oscillate. For a revolving door, this natural frequency depends on factors like the moment of inertia, the stiffness of the supporting structure, and the damping provided by friction and air resistance. If someone applies a periodic force at or near the door's natural frequency, perhaps by pushing rhythmically rather than continuously, the door can begin to oscillate with increasing amplitude. This is generally not desirable, as it can lead to uncomfortable or even dangerous conditions for users. Modern revolving doors are designed with sufficient damping to prevent resonance, but older doors sometimes exhibit this behavior. The materials science aspect of revolving doors is equally fascinating. The door panels must be strong enough to withstand the forces applied by users, yet light enough to be easily moved. They must also be transparent or translucent for safety reasons. You need to see if someone is coming from the other direction. Most modern revolving doors use tempered glass panels. Tempered glass is created by heating ordinary glass to about 650 degrees Celsius and then rapidly cooling it. This process puts the outer surfaces in compression and the inner core in tension, making the glass much stronger than ordinary glass. The strength-to-weight ratio is crucial because, remember, the moment of inertia of the door depends on both the mass and distribution of that mass. The central shaft and bearing systems represent another materials science challenge. The shaft must support not only the weight of the door panels, but also the lateral forces created by off-center loading when people push on the door panels. The bearings must have low friction to allow easy rotation while being durable enough to withstand years of constant use. Modern revolving doors often use sealed ball bearings with specialized lubricants. The physics of bearing operation involves contact mechanics, tribology, the study of friction, wear and lubrication, and materials engineering. The goal is to minimize friction while maximizing durability, and this requires careful consideration of factors like surface roughness, contact pressure, and thermal effects. Temperature effects on revolving doors are more significant than you might think. The thermal expansion and contraction of the door panels and frame can affect the clearances between moving parts. In winter, the metal components contract, potentially creating tighter clearances and increased friction. In summer, expansion can reduce clearances to the point where parts might bind. This thermal behavior follows the basic equation for linear thermal expansion. Delta L equals alpha L0 delta T, where delta L is the change in length, alpha is the coefficient of thermal expansion, L0 is the original length, and delta T is the change in temperature. For a revolving door with mixed materials, steel frame, glass panels, perhaps some aluminum components, different rates of thermal expansion can create internal stresses that affect operation. I remember one particularly hot summer day when the revolving door in our physics building became nearly impossible to turn. The steel frame had expanded more than the bearing housings, creating a situation where the shaft was essentially being squeezed by its own support structure. We had to wait until evening for the temperature to drop before the door would operate normally again. It was like the building was holding the door hostage until the weather cooperated. The safety aspects of revolving doors involve several interesting physics principles. The doors must be designed to prevent people from being trapped or injured, which means considering the forces that can be applied by the door panels and ensuring that these forces never exceed safe limits. Modern revolving doors often include what's called a breakaway feature, where the door panels will give way if excessive force is applied. This might seem simple, but it actually involves sophisticated engineering. The breakaway mechanism must be strong enough to handle normal operating loads, but weak enough to fail safely under abnormal conditions. This is typically achieved using shear pins or similar devices that are designed to fail at predetermined force levels. Speed control is another crucial safety feature. If a revolving door spins too fast, people can be injured by being struck by the door panels or by losing their balance. Most modern doors include speed governors that use either mechanical or electromagnetic damping to limit maximum rotational velocity. The electromagnetic speed governors are particularly clever. They use the principle of electromagnetic induction to create a braking force. As the door spins, it rotates magnets past conductive elements, usually copper or aluminum, which induces eddy currents in the conductors. These currents create magnetic fields that oppose the rotation, providing a smooth, wear-free braking action that increases with rotational speed. Now, let's talk about efficiency, because revolving doors are actually remarkably efficient devices from an energy perspective. In buildings where climate control is important, revolving doors can provide significant energy savings compared to conventional doors. The energy efficiency comes from their ability to minimize air exchange between interior and exterior environments. Every time a conventional door opens, conditioned air escapes and unconditioned air enters. The building's HVAC system must then work to bring this new air to the desired temperature and humidity. The energy required to condition air can be calculated using the equation Q equals mc delta T, or energy equals mass times specific heat capacity times delta T, where Q is the energy required, m is the mass of air, C is the specific heat capacity of air, and delta T is the temperature difference. For a typical office building in a moderate climate, the energy loss through a conventional door can be substantial over the course of a year. Revolving doors reduce this energy loss by maintaining a nearly continuous seal between interior and exterior. Studies have shown that a revolving door can reduce air infiltration by 75% or more compared to a conventional door, leading to significant energy savings. This is why you'll often see revolving doors in airports, hotels, and office buildings, not just because they look impressive, but because they actually save money over time. The economics of revolving doors involve an interesting trade-off between initial cost and long-term savings. A revolving door costs significantly more than a conventional door, often 10 to 20 times more. But the energy savings can justify this cost over the door's lifetime, especially in climates with significant heating or cooling loads. But efficiency isn't just about energy, it's also about people throughput. A well-designed revolving door can actually move more people per minute than a conventional door, despite the fact that each person must wait for their individual compartment. This is because there's no time lost to door opening and closing, and no conflicts between people trying to go in opposite directions. The throughput of a revolving door can be modeled mathematically. If the door has n compartments, rotates at angular velocity omega, and each compartment can hold an average of p people, then the theoretical maximum throughput is n omega people per revolution, or n omega p over 2 pi, or n omega p divided by 2 pi people per radian of rotation. In practice, the actual throughput is lower due to factors like people hesitating before entering, uneven loading of compartments, and the natural variation in how long people take to traverse the door. Speaking of people hesitating, this brings us to what I consider one of the most fascinating aspects of revolving door physics: the psychology-physics interface. Human behavior significantly affects how these doors operate, often in ways that the original designers didn't fully anticipate. People have a natural tendency to synchronize their walking speed with the rotation of the door, which creates a feedback system. If the door is rotating slowly, people slow down. If it's rotating quickly, they speed up, at least up to the point where they become uncomfortable with the speed. This synchronization behavior can be modeled using concepts from control theory, where the human acts as a controller trying to maintain optimal spacing within the door compartment. But humans are also unpredictable controllers. Some people are aggressive door pushers who try to maximize speed. Others are cautious and prefer to let the door move at its own pace. Some people stop suddenly when they see something interesting outside, effectively jamming the door. And then there are those individuals who somehow manage to get confused about which direction the door is rotating and try to walk backwards through it. I once witnessed what could only be described as a revolving door traffic jam when a group of tourists, apparently unfamiliar with the concept, all tried to enter the same compartment at once. The resulting situation violated several laws of physics, primarily those related to the conservation of space, and created a human logjam that took several minutes to resolve. It was like watching a real-time demonstration of the limitations of solid-body physics when applied to groups of people. The acoustic properties of revolving doors are also worth discussing. The doors create distinctive sounds as they operate: the swoosh of air movement, the subtle rumble of bearings, sometimes a squeak or groan if maintenance is needed. These sounds are actually useful feedback for both users and maintenance personnel. The swoosh sound is created by the displacement of air as the door panels move. This is essentially the sound of fluid flow around obstacles, and the frequency and amplitude of the sound can indicate how fast the door is moving and whether there are any flow restrictions due to debris or mechanical problems. Bearing sounds provide information about the mechanical condition of the door. Smooth, quiet operation indicates good bearing condition and proper lubrication. Grinding, squeaking, or rumbling sounds can indicate wear, contamination, or lubrication problems. Experienced maintenance personnel can often diagnose door problems just by listening to them operate. The acoustics also serve a social function. The sound of an approaching revolving door gives people auditory feedback about its operation, helping them time their entry. This is particularly important for people with visual impairments, who rely on acoustic cues to navigate safely through the door. Now, let's consider some of the more exotic physics that can occur with revolving doors. Under certain atmospheric conditions, revolving doors can actually generate static electricity. This happens when dry air moves past the door panels, causing electrons to transfer between the air and the door surfaces. The door essentially becomes a weak Van de Graaff generator. I've personally experienced this phenomenon during particularly dry winter days. You'll push through the door normally, but when you touch the metal push plate on the exit, you get a noticeable static shock. The door has been accumulating charge as it rotates, and you become the path to ground. It's not dangerous, but it can be startling, especially if you're not expecting it. The static buildup can be calculated using principles of electrostatics. The charge accumulation depends on factors like the dielectric properties of the door materials, the humidity of the air, the speed of rotation, and the surface area of the door panels in contact with the moving air. Modern doors sometimes include anti-static treatments or grounding straps to minimize this effect. In extreme weather conditions, revolving doors can exhibit some truly interesting physics. During ice storms, the door panels can become coated with ice, significantly increasing their mass and changing their aerodynamic properties. The additional mass increases the moment of inertia, making the door harder to start moving but giving it more rotational momentum once it's spinning. I recall one memorable ice storm when the revolving door at our university library became so heavily iced that it required 2 people pushing together to get it moving. But once it was spinning, it had so much angular momentum that it would continue rotating for nearly a full revolution after people stopped pushing. It was like a very slow, very large flywheel. Wind effects on revolving doors can be dramatic, especially in tall buildings or exposed locations. Strong winds create pressure differentials that can either assist or resist the door's rotation, depending on the wind direction and the building's orientation. Crosswinds can create oscillating pressures that cause the door to speed up and slow down rhythmically. The most extreme case I've encountered was during a storm at a waterfront hotel. The wind was creating such strong pressure differentials that the revolving door was essentially operating itself, rotating continuously without anyone pushing it. People had to time their entry carefully to avoid being swept along faster than they wanted to go. It was like trying to board a very slow, very large merry-go-round. The physics of revolving doors also extends to some unexpected areas. For example, they can be used as crude seismometers. During an earthquake, the building sways, but the door, suspended on bearings, tends to maintain its orientation due to inertial effects. This relative motion between the door and the building frame can indicate seismic activity. Similarly, revolving doors can be affected by building vibrations from other sources, heavy machinery, traffic, even loud music. I know of one door in a building near a subway line that would mysteriously start rotating slightly every time a train passed underneath. The building's response to the train's vibrations was just enough to overcome the door's static friction and cause it to move. Let's also consider the thermodynamics of revolving doors in more detail. When people move through the door, they're doing work against friction and air resistance, and this work is ultimately converted to heat. On a busy day, with hundreds of people passing through, the cumulative heating effect can be measurable. The heat generation can be calculated from the work done against resistance. If the total resistive torque is tau and the door rotates through angle theta, the work done is W equals tau theta, or work equals torque times theta, and this work is converted to heat. For a door with many users, this can amount to several kilowatts of heating over the course of a day. This heating is usually insignificant compared to other building heating and cooling loads, but it's not zero. In a very well-insulated building with precise climate control, even this small amount of heat generation might need to be considered in the HVAC system design. The interaction between revolving doors and building automation systems is becoming increasingly sophisticated. Modern doors can be equipped with sensors that monitor usage patterns, detect maintenance needs, and even integrate with building security systems. Motion sensors can track how many people pass through the door and in which direction, providing valuable data for building management. Load sensors in the door mechanism can detect changes in operating force that might indicate maintenance needs before a complete failure occurs. Some doors even have cameras that can detect if someone is trapped or in distress within the door compartments. The integration with security systems is particularly interesting from a physics standpoint. The door's rotation can be monitored electronically, and unusual patterns, such as someone repeatedly circling through the door without exiting, can trigger security alerts. The door essentially becomes part of the building's sensor network. Temperature sensors can monitor the thermal behavior of the door mechanism, providing early warning of bearing failures or lubrication problems. Vibration sensors can detect changes in the door's dynamic behavior that might indicate structural problems or wear. All of this sensor data can be processed using machine learning algorithms to predict maintenance needs and optimize door performance. It's a perfect example of how traditional mechanical systems are evolving to become part of the Internet of Things. Now, let's discuss some of the more advanced engineering aspects of modern revolving doors. The latest designs incorporate sophisticated control systems that can adjust the door's behavior based on environmental conditions and usage patterns. For example, some doors include variable damping systems that can increase resistance during high winds to prevent overspeeding, or reduce resistance during normal conditions to make the door easier to use. These systems might use magnetorheological fluids, materials that change their viscosity when subjected to magnetic fields, to provide adjustable damping. The control algorithms for these systems involve principles from control theory, signal processing, and artificial intelligence. The door must respond to changing conditions quickly enough to be effective, but not so quickly that it becomes unstable or uncomfortable for users. Advanced doors might also include predictive algorithms that anticipate usage patterns. For instance, if the door detects that a large group of people is approaching, perhaps through infrared sensors or by monitoring the building's entry systems, it can pre-position itself for optimal throughput. The material science of revolving doors continues to evolve as well. New glass formulations provide better strength-to-weight ratios, improved thermal performance, and enhanced safety characteristics. Smart glass that can change its transparency or thermal properties electronically is beginning to appear in some installations. The structural materials are also advancing. Carbon fiber composites, once limited to aerospace applications, are beginning to appear in high-end revolving doors where weight reduction is critical. These materials offer exceptional strength-to-weight ratios and can be tailored to have specific mechanical properties in different directions. Let's consider the environmental physics of revolving doors in different climates. In hot, humid climates, the door must deal with condensation effects when warm, moist air encounters air-conditioned surfaces. This can create problems with visibility through glass panels and can lead to water accumulation that affects the door's operation. In cold climates, ice formation is a significant concern. Not only can ice add weight to the door panels, but it can also interfere with the sealing surfaces and create safety hazards. Some doors in extreme climates include heating elements to prevent ice formation. Desert environments present their own challenges, with sand and dust infiltration affecting bearing operation and visibility. The thermal cycling in desert climates, hot days and cool nights, can create significant thermal stresses in the door structure. Coastal environments expose doors to salt air, which can cause corrosion problems with metal components. The material selection for these environments must consider galvanic corrosion, stress corrosion cracking, and other forms of environmentally assisted degradation. The physics of revolving doors also intersects with accessibility considerations. For people using wheelchairs or other mobility devices, the timing and spacing requirements are different from those for walking individuals. Some doors include sensors that can detect wheelchairs and automatically adjust their rotation speed to accommodate slower-moving users. The design of accessible revolving doors involves complex trade-offs between competing requirements. The door must move slowly enough for mobility device users, but fast enough to maintain reasonable throughput for other users. The compartment size must be large enough to accommodate wheelchairs, but not so large that the door becomes unwieldy or inefficient. Some of the most interesting physics occurs when revolving doors malfunction or are used improperly. I've seen doors where bearing failures caused severe vibrations that could be felt throughout the surrounding structure. The door essentially became a large, off-balance rotating machine, generating forces that the building structure wasn't designed to handle. Improper loading can create fascinating dynamics. If people cluster in one compartment while others remain empty, the door's center of mass shifts away from its rotation axis, creating an unbalanced condition. The resulting vibrations follow the same physics as any unbalanced rotating machine, with forces that vary sinusoidally with rotation angle. Panel failures can create dangerous conditions where the aerodynamics of the door change suddenly. If a glass panel breaks or becomes loose, the airflow patterns around the door change, potentially creating unexpected forces on users. The door might also become acoustically different, providing different auditory feedback to users. The future of revolving door physics is likely to involve even more sophisticated integration with building systems and environmental controls. Doors might include air purification systems that clean the air as it passes through the small gaps in the door seals. They might incorporate energy harvesting systems that capture some of the mechanical energy from user interactions to power sensors and control systems. Advanced materials might enable doors that can change their properties dynamically, perhaps becoming more transparent in good weather or more thermally insulating in extreme temperatures. Adaptive structures that can change their geometry based on usage patterns might optimize both energy efficiency and user comfort. The integration of artificial intelligence into revolving doors is already beginning. Machine learning systems can analyze usage patterns to predict peak loads, optimize door positioning, and even detect unusual behavior that might indicate security threats or medical emergencies. As buildings become smarter and more connected, revolving doors will likely become important components of building intelligence systems. They're uniquely positioned at the interface between interior and exterior environments, making them ideal locations for sensors that monitor air quality, weather conditions, and human traffic patterns. The physics principles we've discussed tonight, rotational mechanics, fluid dynamics, thermodynamics, materials science, and control theory, will remain fundamental to understanding how these doors work. But the application of these principles will continue to evolve as technology advances. In conclusion, what appears to be a simple mechanical device, a door that spins, is actually a sophisticated application of multiple physics disciplines. From the basic rotational mechanics that govern its motion to the complex fluid dynamics that make it energy efficient, from the materials science that ensures its durability to the control theory that optimizes its operation, revolving doors represent a convergence of physics principles that work together to solve practical problems. The next time you encounter a revolving door, I hope you'll appreciate it not just as a barrier between you and your destination, but as an elegant demonstration of physics in action. Remember the torque you're applying, the angular momentum you're creating, the pressure differentials you're maintaining, and the complex interplay of forces that make that simple push result in smooth, controlled rotation. And if you find yourself trapped in a revolving door, spinning helplessly like a hamster in a wheel, at least now you'll understand the physics of why that's happening. Though I suppose that knowledge might be of limited comfort when you're dizzy, disoriented, and trying to explain to your friends why you're late because you got into a fight with a door and lost. Good night, and please exit through the conventional door at the back of the room. I don't want anyone getting stuck in the revolving door after a lecture about revolving door physics. The irony would be too much to bear. And in case you've enjoyed our evening talk so much and still might be awake, here is another educational video for you.